The library had always been Sophie's sanctuary. Its quiet, dimly lit corners and towering shelves offered her solace from the chaos of college life. That rainy afternoon, with raindrops tapping rhythmically against the tall windows, Sophie slipped into her usual corner with a steaming cup of coffee and her favorite fantasy novel. But today, someone else was there. He sat at the end of her favorite row, leaning over an open book with an intensity she rarely saw. Tousled dark hair fell over his forehead as his eyes flicked across the pages, his expression entirely absorbed. Sophie hesitated, not wanting to interrupt, but her curiosity won out. She slid into the seat across from him, offering a small, polite smile. "Mind if I sit here?" The boy glanced up, surprised but not displeased. His gaze softened, and he returned the smile. "Not at all. It's a good spot. Peaceful." "Exactly why I love it," Sophie replied, her voice light but genuine. She opened her book, but her focus kept straying back to him. The way he read with such passion, as if the words themselves were alive. Minutes ticked by before the silence stretched too thin. "Do you always read with that much intensity?" Sophie blurted out, her cheeks warming at her own boldness. He laughed, the sound warm and rich. "Guilty. Books are kind of my world. I guess I get lost in them too easily." "I understand that." Sophie's fingers traced the edges of her book. "I'm Sophie, by the way." "Lucas." His smile widened, inviting and sincere. "What are you reading?" She held up the cover, her enthusiasm spilling over. "It's this amazing fantasy series. It's all about magic and epic quests, but what I love most are the characters. They feel so real." Lucas's eyes sparkled with interest. "Sounds like my kind of story. I'm more into classics, but there's something irresistible about a well-built fantasy world." Their conversation flowed effortlessly after that. They discussed their favorite books, debated over genres, and swapped recommendations like old friends. Sophie was surprised by how easily she could talk to him, how quickly she felt at ease. The rain outside grew heavier, and before Sophie knew it, hours had slipped by. Her coffee had long gone cold, but she didn't care. There was something about Lucas, his passion for literature, his quiet charm, that made her want to keep talking to him. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked, eyes hopeful but uncertain. Sophie's smile was immediate. "Definitely." As she left the library that evening, Sophie's thoughts were a tangled mess of excitement and curiosity. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she had stumbled upon something special. And she couldn't wait to see where it would lead. From that day on, Sophie and Lucas became inseparable, at least within the walls of the library. Every afternoon, they claimed their cozy corner, stacking books between them like tiny fortresses of literature. Conversations flowed as easily as the turning of pages. Lucas would always arrive first, greeting her with a grin and a book he thought she might enjoy. His enthusiasm was infectious. "You have to read this one, Sophie. The writing is so vivid, it feels like you're living the story." Sophie would laugh, her eyes sparkling with delight. "And you have to try this series. It's the perfect blend of adventure and heart. I guarantee you'll fall in love with the characters." Their voices dropped to whispers when other students wandered by, but even their hushed conversations carried a warmth that felt almost magical. Hours melted away as they discussed plots, dissected themes, and argued about which characters deserved happy endings. But it wasn't just books they shared. Their conversations began to drift beyond fiction, delving into their own worlds. Lucas talked about growing up in a small town where the library was his only escape. Sophie admitted how she often felt like she didn't quite fit in, even among friends. He listened, truly listened, his gaze never straying from her face. And when he spoke, his words always felt genuine, thoughtful. It was rare to feel so understood. One evening, as rain pattered softly against the windows, Lucas leaned back in his chair, his expression a little nervous. "Sophie, can I ask you something?" "Sure," she replied, curiosity threading her voice. "Do you ever feel like the people you're closest to don't really get you? Like they see this version of you, but it's not quite right?" Sophie's heart clenched. "All the time. It's like they're reading a summary of me instead of the whole book." Lucas laughed softly, a touch of sadness in the sound. Exactly. But with you, I don't feel that way. It's like you actually understand what I'm trying to say. She met his gaze, feeling something shift between them. I feel the same way. Their connection grew deeper with each shared sentence, each knowing glance. And Sophie began to notice the subtle things, how Lucas's smile lingered a little longer when their eyes met, how his fingers would brush hers whenever they passed a book between them. When they finally packed up for the night, Lucas hesitated before speaking. Would you like to grab coffee sometime? Outside the library, I mean. Sophie's heart skipped a beat, her cheeks flushing. I'd like that. As they parted ways, Sophie couldn't help but smile. What had started as a chance encounter was turning into something beautiful, and she couldn't wait to see what came next. Their first coffee date led to a second, then a third. Yet, they still returned to their little corner of the library every afternoon, where the quiet felt sacred, their conversations rich and unfiltered. But tonight, something was different. The library was practically deserted, its usual hum of activity replaced by an eerie stillness. Sophie glanced at her phone. They'd lost track of time again. The library was closing in less than an hour, but the thought of leaving felt wrong. As if the moment itself demanded they stay. Lucas closed his book, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. Sophie, there's something I've been meaning to tell you. Her breath caught. His expression was serious, his eyes searching hers as if he was trying to read a book written in her gaze. Go on, she whispered, her voice trembling just enough to betray her nerves. I've never been great with words, unless they're someone else's. He chuckled softly, but his gaze never wavered. But when it comes to you, it's different. Talking to you feels like something I didn't know I was missing. And I think I've been looking for someone like you my whole life. Sophie's chest tightened, her pulse thrumming with an intensity she hadn't anticipated. Lucas, Let me finish, he interjected gently. I like you. Not just as a friend. Not just as someone to share books with. I like you for who you are, the way your face lights up when you talk about your favorite stories, the way you actually listen when I ramble on about things most people don't care about. Sophie's eyes glistened, her heart a chaotic mix of fear and excitement. You make me feel understood, Lucas. Like I can just be me and that's enough. His hand reached across the table, his fingers curling around hers with a warmth that spread through her entire being. I was so nervous to say something. But I had to. I needed you to know. I'm glad you did, Sophie whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Because I feel the same way. They sat there, their hands entwined, the world beyond their little corner fading into irrelevance. Conversation resumed, but it was softer, more intimate, their words laced with shy confessions and quiet laughter. When the librarian's gentle reminder broke their spell, they gathered their things slowly, neither wanting the night to end. Walk me home? Sophie asked, her smile both shy and hopeful. Of course, Lucas replied, his own smile mirroring hers. As they stepped into the cool night air, Sophie's hand still nestled in Lucas's, she couldn't help but marvel at how easily something so beautiful had grown between them. And for the first time, she felt as if her own story was finally beginning. Days turned into weeks, and Sophie and Lucas's connection only deepened. Their library sessions continued, but now, their fingers would brush as they passed books, their eyes lingering longer on each other than on the pages. Conversations spilled into late-night texts and phone calls, their voices sleepy yet unwilling to part. One chilly evening, the library was nearly empty again, and Sophie couldn't help but feel the thrill of being alone with Lucas. The air between them crackled with something unspoken, an electricity that made her heart race. I brought something, Lucas said, setting down a worn, leather-bound book. My favorite collection of poetry. I've been dying to share it with you. Sophie's lips curved into a smile. Read me something. He hesitated, the slightest blush dusting his cheeks. Okay, but only if you promise not to laugh at my dramatic reading voice. No promises, she teased, her laughter light. Lucas's voice lowered, deep and sincere, as he read the words with such emotion that Sophie's chest tightened. The verses spoke of love and longing, of quiet moments shared between souls that truly saw each other. It was beautiful, but it was the way he looked at her between lines that made her pulse quicken. When he finished, Sophie released a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "Lucas, that was incredible." It's the words. They just feel real. His gaze met hers, intense and unwavering. "Like how I feel when I'm with you." The confession hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Sophie swallowed, her voice trembling. "I feel the same. I've never felt this close to anyone before. It's like you get me in a way no one else does." "I do. I really do." Lucas reached for her hand, his fingers entwining with hers. "And I want to keep getting to know you, Sophie. To share more of this, whatever this is." "It feels like something amazing," Sophie whispered, her eyes shimmering with tears of joy. "And I don't want it to end." "It doesn't have to." His smile was soft, reassuring. "This is just the beginning. And I'll be here, as long as you want me to be." Their hands remained linked, the moment stretching out like the perfect line of prose. They spent the rest of the evening talking about everything and nothing, their words blending with the soft rustle of pages turning. As they finally gathered their things and prepared to leave, Sophie glanced back at their cozy corner, her heart brimming with gratitude. What had started as a simple encounter over books had grown into something so much more. When Lucas walked her home that night, their hands still entwined, Sophie knew her story was changing. And she couldn't wait to see where it would go.